Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Gaming Silicon video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with a plethora of AMD processors, which include Ryzen Pros along with Athlons. And we're going to start things out with the Ryzen Pro series. Ryzen Pro, of course, will still be on socket AM4. It features dual channel memory, and it essentially is identical to, let's say, the Ryzen 2700X and so on. But there are a couple of small differences. For one, the TDP is a little bit lower. It's 10 watts lower, so clock speeds are slightly diminished compared to their non-Pro variants. But in terms of feature set, the primary difference here is, of course, Guard Me, or Guard MI if you prefer, which is things such as secure memory encryption, secure boot features, and production environments. So basically, this is obviously for more professional users. It's for the corporate environment, and for those environments, obviously, these type of processors are rather appealing. We see the 2700X, the 2700, and the Pro 2600. And according to AMD's own slides, although this is, of course, multi-threading performance, we see the 2700X, the Pro variant, obviously beating the 8700, and the Pro 2600 obviously competing against the 8600. So because AMD have decided to go with a lower TDP, that's of course so that the heat output of the processors is lower, which obviously can be kind of a big deal in offices, then obviously the clock speed suffers a little bit, but still it should offer more than enough performance for most users in the corporate environment. And obviously the 2700X has been rather successful in, let's say, the multitasking arena, video editing, and so on and so on. If you don't need the performance of, let's say, Threadripper, then this is an absolutely awesome processor. And now we're going to move over to the Athlon Pro 200GE. So what is this thing? Well, it is essentially Raven Ridge, just really cut down. Although it's going to retail, at least according to the rumours, around 55-60 Great British pounds, which is not too shabby for a processor. Although with that said, you're not going to be gaming too well on that, and that's putting it mildly. The performance of this thing is going to be for low-end desktops. It's going to be for the very bare bones essential Windows features. So 2D desktops, 3D acceleration for, let's say, hardware acceleration for video, and so on and so on. It's using the 14nm Raven Ridge architecture. And so we only have 3 of Vega's NGCUs enabled. So that's only 192 shaders, which is pretty bare bones. Nevertheless, we have 2 cores, 4 threads, 512 kilobytes of level 2 cache per core, 4 megabytes total level 3 cache, and with a clock speed of 3.2 gigahertz, although there is no precision boost. But you do get Guard Me and all the secure features that I just mentioned. And in terms of the expansion ability, well, you only get PCI Express 3.0 times 4, and that's out of the times 16 slot. These Athlon processors are obviously intended to compete with Intel's Pentium lineup. And I'm going to slightly hark on to the past for a second. There is something really, I don't know, sad, I suppose, that both Pentium and Athlon, which were the pinnacle of performance, are now relegated to budget brands, to value brands. There's something kind of sad about that, at least to me. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. But certainly to me, it is a little bit sad, and it does, it's just kind of strange. And now let's move over to the RTX series. First of all, according to some reports, we will be seeing the actual official reviews go live on the 17th of this month. So Nvidia are going to start seeding the cards in the not too distant future and provide the drivers, of course, as well. And that's really the key. Just to remind everyone, there are no official drivers available which support these cards to the public right now. And so because of that, a lot of the benchmarks you see, even if they were legit RTX 2080s or TIs or whatever, unless those benchmarks have leaked from an AIB or Nvidia themselves, you have to question the validity of the results. I mean, drivers do kind of important things. It's not like they're, I don't know, responsible for the fan curve or something silly, right? Or only for the fan curve or something silly. They are literally responsible for telling the card how to operate. And so obviously a bad driver or a driver that's not fully supported or an unoptimized driver can make massive differences in performance. I'm curious to see if a reviewer is going to post the review early and keep it up. By doing so, though, honestly, it would burn any bridges that they had with Nvidia and most likely the AIB, which is one of the reasons that you don't want to do that as a reviewer, because it's not even about the fact that, oh, I won't get review samples anymore. It's also the fact that, well, it's just kind of bad practice because well, it means that you won't get discussions with the company. Let's say if something's wrong, if you feel that there's an issue with the card, if you need quotes, if you need support, you've burned your bridges, and it's just not really good to do as a reviewer. So I suspect if they do leak, it's going to be anonymous kind of leaks, and we're just going to have to see how that all ends up. It's possible, of course, that as they go to retail, some of the cards could leak, or perhaps some of the cards fall off the back of the wagon. And don't forget, just to clarify, this is not for the 70. The RTX 2070 launches later. So if you're thinking, well, you know, I want to get the RTX 2070, I wonder how it's going to perform, my best advice to you, my friend, would be to say, hey, how is the RTX 2080 doing it compared to the 1080? And then, of course, you can get a rough approximation of what Nvidia are doing from one generation to the other. There has been so much discussion regarding the ray tracing performance for these cards, whether it's the RTX 2080, the 2070, the 2080 Ti, or the Ti, or whatever you want to call it, or the balls to the wall edition. The fact is there is so much discussion exactly what we can be expecting. And rather interestingly, there have been a couple of quotes and interviews that have started to pop up. One of them stems from DICE. Now, DICE are telling us that they're actually dialing in right now the settings for Battlefield 5 and ray tracing, and they've said that there is a lot of room left in optimization, but they are dialing back the settings because right now they're just not getting A, the performance they want, and B, they're just not doing it in an optimized way. So there has actually been a recent interview with Tom's Hardware. I'm going to plonk that link into the description, and according to Christian Holmquist, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, what I think is that we need to take apart some levels and see if there's something that sticks out. Because the materials are not tweaked for ray tracing, sometimes they may show off something that's too strong that otherwise are not directly intended, but otherwise we won't change the levels as they are. And then we need to change some of the parameters in the ray tracing engine to maybe tone down some of the things a bit. Now, this is a too long didn't read of various interviews and so on, but right now, ray tracing reflections are running at full resolution. So they could certainly reduce that quality. And by doing that, they can upscale it using a DLSS or another technique, which they are not currently doing. So because of that, obviously they're putting a lot more work onto the GPU and the RT cores. They also are not using any custom. According to reports, we're getting 60 frames per second on the Battlefield 5 RT demo, 60 FPS at 1080p, and around 50-ish frames per second up to at 1440. And according to various reports, we're seeing 30 FPS or less at 4K. But once again, this is incredibly unoptimized. Some people are like, well, it's 1080p and 60 FPS. Honestly, if we hit 1440p, 60 FPS with ray tracing, I'm going to be pretty impressed given it's a new technique and just how expensive it really is. Now, of course, I'm not telling you that you should buy the cards with that. Ultimately, what you do to your monies is totally up to you. In fact, I'm going to try to remember to plonk a poll in the video description. Do check out the poll. It's not a complex one. It's, are you going to be pre-ordering the card, or have you pre-ordered the card or not? I'm curious to see what people say about that. Apparently, no impact in performance whatsoever in regards to geometry. And they do believe that there is about 30% performance to gain just from the way instances run. If you recall, some of this is actually from a Eurogamer interview, some of this is from other interviews, so I'm just kind of throwing all of this together. I'm going to link them, however, in the video description, just because. And basically, all I'm saying is that there is still a lot of optimization. Now, I'm not saying, once again, that these cards are going to be amazing and that we're going to be getting 5,000 frames a second of ray tracing, or at 4K without ray tracing. I'm just trying to say that there is a lot of like, oh, these cards are going to suck with ray tracing and it's going to be really overhyped. Ultimately, my personal opinion to anyone is just wait to see what the performance is really like. Meanwhile, however, on a totally different game, Metro Exodus, we see HairWorks, advanced Physx, and RayTracing. And accordingly, we are looking at 1080p 40 FPS-ish so far. And this is according to reports over at PC Games Hardware. It will be curious how much more optimization they've got left, though. Ultimately, this game is not going to be released until February, which is obviously several months into the future, so it's possible developers can still do some more tweaking, especially as drivers get a little more final. But I think what I'm really getting from this is that these cards, Turing, is probably a step in the right direction. It's more like this is establishing the technology and they're going to be tweaking it and advancing it over the next several years. And that's really the key, years. This is not going to be right now. Another rather interesting fact as well is a couple of developers have said that they will definitely be supporting AMD. And it would appear, at least from the interview over at Tom's Hardware, DICE are open to the idea of pushing ray tracing on AMD cards, though it's a bit of an ambiguous quote. They've basically said that AMD are not there, of course, fully with ray tracing yet, but they're certainly not only going to be pushing DXR as it comes together. My personal opinion is AMD eventually, of course, will release a card which does push ray tracing as well. I genuinely think both companies do feel it's the future. Now we're going to be discussing something a little more console-orientated, specifically crossplay and the PlayStation. Yes, I want to chime into this because, quite frankly, I think the situation is just getting ludicrous at this point, and I think it's important that we let Sony know that we're not happy about this. Now, the Fortnite situation is pretty bad. I mean, the fact of the matter is, not only can you not play with other users of, let's say, the Nintendo Switch, which is a very different console, a very different system to Microsoft. I mean, they're very different. I mean, you can be sitting on a train playing the Nintendo Switch, for example. But furthermore, they lock your account to the PlayStation Network, which is crap. It's really bad. Especially because if you don't know about it, you can quite literally do it by accident. And now, of course, it's pretty common knowledge, but still, people were doing that and not realizing that all of their progress was essentially tied to one account. Your account is now held by Sony. But also Sony have been so backwards and forwards on this issue. One of the things they've said is that, well, yeah, it's okay. The reason we're not doing this is very simple. It's because that we want to protect our users. You know, some of the users, for example, with Minecraft, who are a lot younger, so we don't want to let anyone play with them without being able to control that, without being able to protect our user base. The problem is, then they go right ahead in a different interview and say, well, actually, we're open to crossplay. After all, we've done it with the PC. The PC is way less regulated than an Xbox, than Nintendo Switch, right? There's not even a point of comparison. The two are so different. So I find it absolutely ludicrous that Sony are trying to use this. And now, new statements, the head honcho over at Sony is saying, well, the PlayStation is the best place to play games. And Mike Ybarra over at Xbox is calling them out on this. He also goes on to say that their platform, Microsoft, not only because of the Xbox but Windows as well, is absolutely ginormous, and they are looking to empower gamers. And really, that's the absolute crazy thing here. Sony are going to most likely lose out because people are going to remember this stuff. And the one thing I will say about the PlayStation right now is it does have a really good exclusive. It's got the God of War. It has the Horizon Zero Dawn, and that, of course, is really pushing them. But Microsoft, we know that they've acquired all of those studios and really just letting them go to town with the next generation of Xbox and possibly the Xbox One as well. Sony are also facing a lot of pressure from Nintendo, although arguably what Nintendo bring to the table is very different from, let's say, Xbox. And PC, of course, is just going amazing right now as well. PC is a really popular platform. I think Sony just needs to concede here. They just need to open up the platform. And that, of course, doesn't mean that you can't have exclusive games. I'm all for console exclusives. I'm all for the likes of Mario. I'm all for the likes of the Zeldas. I'm all for the likes of God of War being exclusive to the platform. After all, without that, why would you buy other platforms? Instead, it's more the actual ability to, if your friend Bill happens to buy one console and you happen to buy another console, it absolutely sucks that on those games which there's no real reason you can't play them, yeah, you should be able to. And finally, Sony are also saying that the Fortnite is the best place to play PlayStation, and that's just bull. That is just bull crap. I really want to swear more than that, but I can't because YouTube will probably demonetize me and I'll probably get smacked. But seriously, that's a load of crap. First of all, it's not the best place. Technically speaking, your console is limited. You can't even play online with others. You're essentially saying, well, no, you can't play with your friends who own these other systems. That means that the Xbox, for example, or the Switch is better in that you've got the ability to play online with other people. Now, yes, you've got millions of people to play with on the PlayStation, but that doesn't mean anything if your friend does not own a bloody PlayStation, does it? It doesn't. It doesn't make a difference. If your friend does not own a PlayStation and your friend instead owns a Nintendo Switch and you own an Xbox, well, okay, you'll just play the Xbox version because your friend can play with you with his Switch or their PC or whatever. And that's the other thing as well. Even if you were to talk about the graphical side of things, the PlayStation still isn't the best because, well, the Xbox One X is just more powerful. It's that simple. And that's not even to talk about the PC. I mean, if we were really to be silly about this, we could say, well, the Fortnite on the PC is the best version because obviously you've got the better control. So yeah, you can play at like 16 billion p on the PC. You've got all the different options, and it's just silly to me that Sony are really being so adamant here. It's clear that gamers are not going to be giving up on this anytime soon. And you do get that level of apathy where people get really mad at something and eventually it just kind of falls by the wayside. But this is probably not one of those times because we're getting into an increasingly connected society. Everyone wants to play with someone else. And I just think that Microsoft, even Nintendo, I mean, I've given Nintendo a hard time, but I have to say, Nintendo are really nailing it with the Switch. And in many instances, I think that they're doing things very well. Yeah, so come on, Sony. Be sensible about this. This is the reason, after all, that the PlayStation is doing so well. Not only were you $100 cheaper, but you were appealing to the consumer. And I'm not saying anything new here, but still, I'm just saying, keep tweeting them, keep making your feelings heard. Don't be rude. Just make it clear that this is not something that you are going to just be like, it's fine. Let them know that, well, hey, if you're not going to do this, I'm happy to play on the PC, I'm happy to play on the Xbox, I'm happy to play on the Switch. But for those exclusives, I'll maybe play on the PlayStation, but anything else, yeah. Anyway, with that said, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. Normal stuff, like, share, comment, and subscribe. There's going to be a couple of cool testing videos up in the next few days. There'll be a lot of content that I'm going to be recording. Content will be consistent over the next several days, despite the fact I'm going to be traveling to Seattle, so don't worry about that. So yeah, with any luck, you guys will continue to enjoy it. With that said, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.